Thank you all. Today is my privilege to discuss a new tool in a toolbox, an exciting new approach to clinical trials called the Promising Pathway Act. I want to thank the organizers of the joint section of the Congress of Neurological Surgeons, especially Dr. Kostas Hadjipanayas, and also want to thank the MUSELLA Foundation and Al MUSELLA in particular for allowing me to present this important work. There are going to be three parts to this talk: the huge unmet need in this space, the PPA, what is coming from Congress, and how you can help, and how we need your help. What is the PPA? Well, why are we doing this? In the past 30 years, there have been only 3 FDA-approved trials. I've been involved with 2 of them, the ARROWs, the Henry Brem gliadel work, which is done 1995, Stoop temozolomide 20 years ago, and more recently Stoop with the electrical fields in 2017. Here we are in Los Angeles. Last night, Linda Liao got the coveted Andy Parsa Award for her pioneering work in immuno-oncology. I work with her, and we reported 3 years ago promising results of dendritic cell vaccine increasing survival for newly diagnosed and recurrent GBM. However, this study was at a great expense, between $500 and $600 million, 331 patients, 91 sites, 4 countries, and 20 years after the scientific breakthrough was reported in our literature. During that time, the patients, and there are a significant number of long-term survivors, didn't know if the vaccine was working. We have no specific real-time biomarker, so there is what we call scan anxiety. The survival analysis was done using ECP, which is external control populations. And taking a look at the overall landscape, we know the importance. This paper with Al Masella and others, Ralph DeVito, many in this space, many in this room, show the guiding principles for adult. Theoretically, every patient with a fatal disease should be in a clinical trial, but in adults, only 10%. And what's wrong with the clinical trial landscape? So this work by Brian Alexander's colleagues showed that clinical trial landscape is marked by long developmental times, which I mentioned, inadequate dissemination of information, which virtual trials and the clinicaltrials.gov is trying to address, suboptimal go, no-go decision-making, low participation. 93% of trials are in that exploratory dose-finding, safety, phase 1 and phase 2 when we're looking for efficacy signals. And then when things go on to phase 3 trials, only 1 out of 8 is positive. So pretty bad batting average. So who's going to come up to bat and help us figure this out? So I shout out to Al Masella, who developed the virtual trials and now clinicaltrials.gov, raised $13 million, distributed that to patients for reducing the financial toxicity, copay support, seed grants, including some funding to UCLA to help Linda Liao, who also benefited from ABTA support. Absolutely critical, the seed grants. And venture philanthropy to sustain the seed grants. There's a good model with ONC201, which is now dordaviprone, FDA approved by Jazz Pharmaceutical. And patient education, obviously important. And there are 2 books that are available on the website at no cost. One on newly diagnosed tumors, GBM, malignant tumors, and low-grade tumors. So what is the Promising Pathway Act? Let's do a deep dive in this. Passed this year by a bipartisan group, and you'll see J.D. Vance wearing his red tie and Cory Booker, representing New Jersey, blue state. We're in a blue state, but this was introduced by Michael Braun from North Dakota. This has nothing to do with politics, everything to do with patients and the health of our country. So, in addition to the congressional support, happy to report that 102 nonprofit associations are representing brain tumors here and also rare diseases have signed on. Right now, it's about 120. The objectives of the PPA are to increase the amount of research, provide early access, and streamline the process, and to explore combination therapies. Many, as we know, promising drugs are not being developed because of the expense and the time and so on. For example, with the diffuse pontine gliomas, the standard mechanisms now would cost $600,000 per patient per year, and if the PPA were passed, it's estimated it would reduce it 90% to $60,000 per patient per year, and the time from 10 years to 3.5 years. So that's huge. What are the provisions? It's a conditional approval for drugs that show significant promise in early phase trials. So there would be continuous evidence gathering with a real time and a large database, so we can get those external controls without the dreaded placebo control. We would have patient and physician involvement and engagement with the dialogue, and the cost for the drug would be covered by insurance. There would also be a sunset clause. There would be milestones. 2 years would be a condition. There would be an interim analysis, and if the drug at 8 years is not having significant safety, is not having significant efficacy, or if there are any red flags in terms of safety, the approval would be withdrawn. So summary: increased choice, increased innovation, increased competition, lowering regulatory costs and lowering drug prices, better access, encouraging medical innovation, and improved patient outcomes. This is something that we all can get behind. What are the concerns? Safety. We want to make sure that the risks are similar to those using the drugs under expanded access, which occurs currently, or entering a phase 2 trial, which is of course occurring. So there'll be no increased risks. Regulatory oversight. The FDA now would have to have a more robust monitoring system to balance speed and evidence. And we want to avoid underpowered studies, which could lead to false positives or false negatives. So what are the current alternatives to PPA? There's the Right to Try Act, which sounds good, that terminal patients are allowed to try any drug, but that's been very challenging, and the Scientific American summarizes as so-called right to try gives patients false hopes. There is expanded access, which basically is the forerunner of the PPA. We're trying to expand access to everyone. And so it does get FDA approval almost all the time, but it requires a lot of paperwork, and only few patients, estimated as 1,000 per year, which is clearly insufficient and inefficient. So accelerated approval is to have the standard approval process, but instead of using clinical endpoints such as overall survival, progression-free survival, we use surrogate endpoints, a biomarker. This still requires multiple large trials, and actually an additional regulatory burden is to do a phase 4 post-approval clinical trial. So that is probably not the best solution to this problem. Going back to Dr. Lau and the work coming from UCLA and beyond, adding checkpoint inhibitors to the dendritic cell vaccine, or adding TLR agonists, shows very promising survival. And we were involved at Penn with a study, ABTC 1603, pioneered by Patrick Wen and Dr. Chioco at Dana-Farber, Mass General Brigham, showing combining viral oncolytics with checkpoint inhibitors in a certain population will lead to significant and promising survival data. So that's the kind of, we need to have the mechanisms to enable these multimodal approaches. Were becoming more prevalent and important and relevant. Uh, so to summarize, the Promising Pathway Act modernizes drug approval, introduces pragmatic, adaptive, patient-centered regulatory pathways that are novel. Its implementation could be a big gain, a big win for patients with severe illnesses such as glioblastoma and the pediatric gliomas, while maintaining necessary safeguards, and it could set a great precedent for future reforms. We salute the senators, both Democratic and Republican. We must remember that patients are front and center. This wonderful young girl whose dream is to become a scientist, unfortunately has a pontine glioma. So let's make her dream come true. There's lots of think tanks working on this approach. It has a lot of momentum. We want to thank MUSELLA, all the patients, all the nonprofits, all of you in the room. Here's what you can do. This is not just an academic lecture about the science. This is actionable. We need your help. 1 minute of your time. Go to you can sign the petition at this website, virtualtrials.org, or simply scan the code. This is what you'll see. It'll take 1 minute of your time. I want to thank you for taking that minute, and I want to thank everyone in this room, many of whom are my friends, colleagues, supported me in my career, for the amazing work you do day in, day out. And thank you.